Welcome to the Truman Charities podcast. I am Jamie Truman, your host. I'm sure you have all watched Justin Pugh play as an offensive lineman for the Giants over the years. I interviewed Justin for our Vanishing Father series. When I began talking to Justin, I originally thought that we would discuss the loss of his father. However, it turned into an incredible conversation about the impact his stepfather, Frank, has had on him. Justin speaks about how Frank helped him throughout the loss of his father, the values he has instilled in him throughout the years, a suggestion Frank made that changed the course of Justin's football career, and what values he would like to instill in his newborn daughter. This is Justin's story. Justin, thank you so much for coming on to talk to us today.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. So, you know what? Let's start a little bit from the beginning. Tell me, where you were born and a little bit about your family dynamic.
Yeah, so I was born in the suburbs of Philadelphia, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, to be exact, about 45 minutes north of Philly. Grew up there, mom, sister, dad. Parents were kind of on and off when I was young. They were kind of going through a divorce at the time. I didn't even know it. My father worked for NASCAR. So back in the day, before the internet and before eBay and you could order things online, my dad would actually follow the NASCAR races in a big tractor trailer truck. He would go from Dallas to, San Francisco or Arizona, wherever the races were that weekend. He would sell souvenirs. Think Dale Earnhardt replica cars or Jeff Gordon jackets. And so he was kind of always on the road. So it was really me, my mom, and my sister growing up in the suburbs of Philadelphia and figuring all that out. And that was the start. That's like my earliest memories. And I just remember my sister and I sending videos to our dad on the road, like, we miss you, dad, all those different things. So it was really just the three of us were kind of the core family dynamic there.
Do you love NASCAR because of your dad or no?
Not at all. Like I couldn't, we used to, so every summer we would go with him to the races and we would live with him for a month. So when we were my mom was a school teacher, so she would get summers off. So I guess we kind of gave her a little bit of a break. She could go and, enjoy herself a little bit on her summer vacation. And my sister and I would go with my dad and we would drive around. So we would go he would come pick us up in Philadelphia and we would drive to Texas where he was stationed at the time, kind of like the just center of America, easy to get where he needed to. And we would help him sell souvenirs. We'd help him play, set everything up. My sister was a little more OCD than me, so everything was really neat, all the replica cars and hanging shirts up. And we would help, do sales. And at the end of the races, we would go onto the racetracks and find like dollar bills that people had dropped. So that was kind of the month of July for us. And then we come back, start school, and dad would still be on the road and back kind of to normal life. So that was really how it all unfolded for us.
Okay, so did you see your dad mostly just in the summer times when you were there? How about throughout the year?
Yeah, it would normally be we would see him in the summer and then we would see him like around Christmas. He would come back for Christmas. He'd always come. He'd have the best gifts. I would get I remember an authentic jersey or the video game or the PlayStation that was big at the time, whatever that console was. And that was kind of his way of making up for not being around as much, was like, hey, I'm going to get you a sweet present for Christmas. So I remember I'd always give my mom a hard time, like, oh, I wish you would have got us more things. You're kids, you're just a little unappreciative at times, especially around the holidays. You want all these different things. And then I'm like, Mom, why did dad get me all these jerseys and great gifts? And lo and behold, it was kind of like, yeah, he wasn't really around this year doing the other things he needed to do. So that was his way of kind of making up for it.
So tell me a little bit about your father and some of the values that he instilled in you as a child.
Yeah, so this is kind of where my story may differ from other people, where my parents got divorced, I think officially when I was like 5 or 6 years old. It was, now looking back, you look at those videos me and my sister are sending to my dad, and you could like see my mom was going through it. So like she was suffering in silence, she was putting up with a lot. And my dad, I never really got to have those conversations with my dad of like, as a grown man, like what to expect. It was always more of like where things, it was more of like just trying to make up for lost time every time I would see him. And so I never really got to learn those values. I remember that one summer I did go and work with him. I realized how important my education was to me. My mom was a school teacher and she always harped education. And when my dad left NASCAR and transitioned into the job he had after, he was burying telephone cable wires from the telephone pole to the houses and trenching under roads, trenching under, not having a college degree. He went to the Navy right out of high school. And I don't think he was prepared for what was going to happen if his first career choice fell through. And it did. So I really learned the value of hard work when was trenching wires from telephone poles to houses in the Outer Banks for a summer. And that made me value my education. I remember coming back that summer and telling my mom, like, I'm going to college, I'm getting my degree. I'm always going to have that piece of paper to fall back on. And that's what I did.
So how did your love for football come about?
It was more a love for collision, for violence. I played ice hockey growing up. My mom remarried. We moved in with my stepfather and two brothers when I was 6 years old, and I had some great role models, male role models in my life at that point. My oldest stepbrother Sean is 10 years older than me, and my other stepbrother Michael is 8 years older, and they kind of took me in, and I was just spoiled only boy. My mom, my sister kind of took care of me to being like the runt of the litter, the youngest of four, and the dynamics completely shifted. And I'm getting away from your question there, but things started to morph at that time, and it was definitely a new scenario and a wake up call for me. And being the youngest, I used to get beat up on a little bit, not beat up in like a sense of I was abused by any means, but just typical brothers.
I know what you mean.
We'd fight, we'd be outside, we'd be competing. We ended up moving next to four boys next door. So all of a sudden I went from being the only boy that was just, very spoiled, hated to lose. I would throw tantrums to now being thrown into a scenario where I was around six boys at all times, very competitive nature. And it was like a shock to my system. So I grew up playing ice hockey with my brothers. My stepdad was an ice hockey coach. Both my brothers played. And it got a little expensive, and I was growing. I was getting so much bigger. They're like, hey, why don't you try football for a year? And this was in 7th grade. And I did it. I loved it. And I never looked back from that point, never played hockey again. And that was where my football career started to take off.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that it wasn't until 7th grade that you started to play football.
Yeah, it was more or less like, hey, give us a break from having to buy new ice skates, new pants. I grew out of all my brothers are a little bit smaller than me. I'm like 6'5". They're both 5'11", 6 foot. So by the time that I was in like middle school, I was growing out of some of their equipment, and it was like, hey, why don't you just give us a break this year? Try football.
Yeah.
You're just all right at hockey. And I transitioned to football, and the competition, the violence, the one-on-one, it just suited me. I was always like trying to catch up with my brothers, and I always wanted to beat them up or wrestle them, take them down to the ground. So football really was kind of like that outlet for me to go out and kind of release that side.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Going from hockey to football, because there's a lot of similarities between the two sports. So I want to go back a little bit about when you're growing up and the loss of your dad and what that was like for you as a child.
Yeah. So like I told you, that one summer I went and worked for my dad, and it was just me. My sister didn't come down that summer. I was going into 7th grade at the time, 7th grade, 8th grade at the time. My sister kind of was in high school playing sports, so she in summer couldn't really take that summer off. So I just went down, and I'm working for my dad, and I just remember how much I hated it. And I kept saying, Dad, like, why won't you move back up north to be close to Jenna and I? It's my sister. And, it was one of those things where you don't understand as a child at that age, like why my dad wasn't living in the same town, or I was only seeing him 2 to 3 times a year. And still to this day, I have no idea. Like I never got a straight answer for him as to why. And maybe there was somewhat of guilt or shame that he was like left and lost his job and wasn't able to kind of provide the life maybe he thought. These are all fill in the blanks. I have no idea. And I remember I was a little rebellious in school. I wasn't always, doing what I was told. I was talking to friends or joking around, and I got a detention one year. And so I'm staying after school for detention. I remember my stepdad came and got me out of detention. I was like, this makes no sense. Like I had no idea why he was here. And my stepdad actually the one that broke it to me that my father on site in North Carolina, burying telephone poles in the ground, had a massive heart attack at 46 and passed away on site. So at 13 years old, you're in detention. You're kind of like think it's funny that you're getting out of detention. Like, oh, my stepdad came and got me. And then he breaks that news to me. And it was almost more shock than anything. Like, you don't think at 13 that death is even real, that someone could die. Maybe a grandparent. At that point, all my grandparents were still alive. So I never encountered death before. And then for it to be your father, after spending a month living with him, and he had said he was going to move back, and he had all these promises. So like, you build up your father to be this mythical figure, and then before any of these things were able to happen, he passes away. It was a shock to my whole being, and I never really. I remember I cried. I was so sad, but like seeing my grandmother who lost her son, seeing my sister, and seeing how all these dynamics really worked out. And like the person that was there for me the most was my stepfather. He had lost his father a few years prior. And I remember him kind of taking me in, and he had been that father figure from 6 years old on. My stepdad was the one that was always there. He was a disciplinarian. He was teaching me hard work. He was a carpenter, and then became a project manager and worked for Skanska and worked his way up. And every day he was up at 5 a.m. going to work at home. He just set that example for us. And he was the one that really, comforted me, got me through that. My sister was another one there because, my mom had been through so much pain with my dad that that was a dynamic I still haven't even talked about with her to this day. But me and my sister were really there for each other, went through the whole process, burying, all those things. He was brought up to our hometown, buried at a cemetery next to some other older family members that I didn't know. So that was a really tough time. And at that point, I didn't know how to react. I still don't know how to react. I never really had that relationship with my dad to like even have a grown man conversation of like what to expect. Like, he never really saw me play football. So I don't even know how he would respond to what I'm doing right now. I just kind of, daydream of what that relationship would look like. And that's all I'll ever have there. And it's unfortunate, but at the same time, I'm very fortunate to have the infrastructure and family in place that I do. I had two older brothers that really took me under their wing. My stepfather, Frank, I wouldn't be here without him and his guidance. And then my mom and my sister. It's really been a good ending to a very bad scenario.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk a little bit about Frank, your stepdad, and what kind of values did he instill in you growing up?
It was tough love. Like, we're not a hug, say I love you family. We're a like punch you on the shoulder and say, hey, keep going. Like, it's time to get to work. So he was that, he was in construction his whole career. So very like tough on us from the point, like, we're mowing the grass, we're doing our chores. You don't speak back to your mother. Like, you do the right thing. No elbows on the table. And I needed that. I needed that structure. I didn't know I needed it. I probably hated it at the time. And he, for, you don't really realize it. I remember I was a little punk, and I would be like, you're not my dad. You can't tell me what to do, when I was younger. And realizing like what type of man it takes to raise someone else's son. Like, my dad wasn't there raising me. He took that on as his responsibility. And every time I'm in the NFL, it's always, people harp on my dad passing away and this like tragedy that I had to overcome. But I guess like that tragedy was there, and I dealt with it, and I still deal with it. But I had this man there that was in my life that was a father figure. So I never felt without. Like, I never felt like I didn't have a dad. So that's like one of the things that I always it kind of ate at me throughout my career, because everyone wants to talk about the adversity and how hard it is to overcome. But if you don't have that person that steps into that and fills that void, then you're at loss. And I never was at loss not having a father figure. Between my two brothers who were there, and then my stepdad who was there, I've had it all.
So do you think that you would be at the place that you are now without your stepfather?
No shot. I mean, I remember I was just, when I was in college, I remember this distinctively. He always was like, when he spoke, you listened. He wasn't always one on a soapbox, just like going on and on. But when he had something to say, he would let you know. And in a firm way, he would let you know, like, hey, this is the decision that we're going with. And I remember I wanted to be a defensive lineman, and through college, you go and take these visits, and they break you up, and they say, hey, all the guys that think they want to be recruited as a defensive lineman go this way, and all the ones that want to be offensive linemen go that way. And I'm like on my way to go with the defensive lineman. He like grabs me, and he's like, you're an offensive lineman. He took me to that meeting. And like, from that point on, Syracuse recruited me as an offensive lineman. I started leaning more towards the offensive line at camps and different things, and ended up being a good decision. 15 years later, I'm still playing offensive line, got to play professionally, got a scholarship offer. So he was just always the one that was instilling that hard work. And me and my brothers joke now, my stepdad is like the handiest person ever. So when he comes out to visit us now, I always leave things for him to fix, like hang these pictures or level this or hang a TV up for us. And when we were younger, we stood in order of how much help we could be. So my stepdad was always fixing whatever was wrong. My brother Michael, who's the middle brother, ended up being in the Air Force. He was a flight engineer. He was a mechanic for a little bit, so he was able to help out a lot, and he could almost do everything on his own. Our oldest brother Sean's an insurance salesman, so he's just as worthless when it comes to doing anything handy as me. But he had seniority, so he got to stand there, and I was in the back. I just carry the whatever needed to be carried, go grab a beer if someone needed a beer. So we kind of stood in order of importance. And that's something to this day, like if anything needs to be fixed, I don't even have to be helping. I just have to be standing there, or else I'm going to catch slack from my siblings and him. So that's kind of like how our chain of command goes. It's something that's funny even to this day. I'm useless when it comes to anything handy around the house. I think I got the leaf blower out the other night. My wife was filming it. She thought it was the funniest. She's like, "You're such a handy person. You're blowing the leaves." So that's the extent of what I can do.
So why did he ever tell you why he pushed you in a certain direction?
Honestly, no. I think he just saw. Well, he always used to tell me he was an ice hockey coach, so he had a good judge of like athleticism and what you were able to accomplish on the field. And when I skated, he would always joke that I skated like I had a refrigerator strapped to my back. I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't the quickest. I had a knack for aggression. I would always, be an aggressive player. So I think he knew at that time I probably wasn't going to go very far playing defensive line, that I'd probably be better off being a protector. And maybe he knew that was like a trait that I grew up with the same 8 friends since I was 7 friends. I was the 8th since I was 6 years old. And they were all a little bit smaller than me. They're all Jewish guys except for me. And we would joke that like they were the smartest guys in the room and they picked the biggest kid at first grade to be friends with and protect them. They kind of did some of the talking and I would back them up. And maybe he just saw that trait that I had in me to be a protector and to be like, that type of person in the group. Mm-hmm. And he pushed me that direction. That's a good question. I probably have to ask him next time I see him, why offensive line? What made you do that?
Yeah,
he'll crack a joke and make fun of me for sure, but there's probably something deep down that he won't ever admit.
So what type of influence did your 2 older brothers have on you? Because there was that age gap, 10 years plus.
Yeah, 10 years for my oldest and then 8 for my brother. So me and my sister are 18 months apart and they're 2 years apart or 18 months, something like that. And so when we came into the situation, we didn't really know what we were getting ourselves in for. And like the first person I got to give a shout out to is my sister. She is the toughest chick you'll ever meet. She had to deal with my brothers and me. I was like the younger one and her always making, giving her jokes and giving her a hard time. And then my other brothers were like, typical older brothers. They were always picking on us, teasing us. And we had to fight back. And my sister was like relentless. She's still to this day, she can dish it out with the best of them. And my older brothers taught me about competition. Everything in our family is a competition. We go down the shore or go on a family vacation and we do like a cooking competition every year. You pair up with a family member and you compete. We go to the golf course, we compete. We were just in the Outer Banks a month ago and we're playing beach volleyball, spike ball, throwing, wiffle ball, whatever it was, we're competing in at all times. And that's what makes my family so great. No matter what we're doing, it could be, we do this family Olympics every July 4th. And it's like we do water things, we do balloon, like anything you can imagine to compete in, my family competes in. And that pushed me to be better, to be always striving for like the acceptance of my older brothers. I wanted to impress them so much. I wanted to like fit in. So I think that was the one thing I was always trying to beat the neighborhood boys and whatever we were doing, and that's something that to this day, that's that competition is what drives my family. It drives my older brothers. They took me from a little spoiled brat into somewhat of a less spoiled brat. Maybe they probably tell you I still am to this day, but yeah, it's such a great family dynamic. Just like any family, we have our ups and downs, we have our arguments, but without the crew that I have, I don't know where I would be today.
What was your family's reaction when you made it to the NFL?
The
When you got,
Giants, we're
yeah,
going
when
to
you
New
got
York.
drafted?
That was the first reaction. It was like the New York Giants, we're Philadelphia through and through. Like we're supposed to be on the Eagles. Like we're not supposed to be with the Giants. And that was something that even to this day, Philadelphia and New York are such rivals that it was hard on my family because they were back in Philadelphia. I'm in New York, and everyone thought I was a traitor to where I was from because the Giants drafted me. Um, and it was, they had nothing but supportive. My sister and two of my cousins came up with this thing called the Pugh Crew, where if you came to a game, you got a little T-shirt to the Pugh Crew on it, and they started that when I was in high school. And my last college game, I remember we had like 250 people there supporting me through my extended family, my mom's side, my dad's side, my stepdad's side. They all always came out and supported and were there for me. So I had a great family infrastructure that has really carried through to this day.
So when you met your wife, what kind of advice did you get from your stepfather, or what are some of the values that you took from growing up and watching either your father or your stepfather and wanted to bring that into your marriage?
Yeah, so me and my wife, it's funny. We yin and yang so well. Like I'm into the sports and I'm super competitive, and my wife's competitive, but her family's a lot more loving than my family was. Like saying I love you on the phone, hug every time we see each other. They're an Italian family, so they're very just like over the top. Always, just the best people ever. So when we first met, it was just like I'm not a big holding hands and hugging and cuddling on the couch, and I'm still not to this day. So trying to figure out like our love languages, I guess, so to speak, was tough at first. And going and seeing her family, it really started to change my perspective on things. Like now, I say I love you on the phone much more than I ever did. Me and her dad joke all the time, like of how our relationship has evolved. And my father-in-law has become a huge impact on my life. He's another father to me. I call him all the time for advice and things of that nature. I think my in-laws are actually going to move out to Arizona once our baby is born here in the next 6 months. So I'm super excited to have them in our lives and continue to challenge the beliefs. And because she was raised a certain way and I was raised a certain way, and those beliefs and ideas aren't always equal. And we're trying to fight through how we want to raise our children and how we want to live our lives. And it's a constant, I don't want to say battle, it's a constant give and take where there's certain hills that I don't want to die on. So I have no problem if our kids do this or are raised this way. And there's certain things I want that my wife gives. So I think that's been the one challenge for us. We also met and moved to Arizona away from all of our friends and family. We didn't have anyone out here. My wife has been like my rock the last 6 years of our relationship. We got married a year and a half ago, April of last year. And it's just been me and her. And then COVID hit, and it was just me and her in the house learning about each other and what we like and what we dislike and what buttons to push on each other. And it's not always easy, and we know we have to continue to work at it. And I couldn't be more excited to be raising a child with someone than my wife. It's the reason that you know I wanted to marry her. I knew she was the one that was perfect for me, and she's the one that I wanted my children to be like. I wanted them to be half of her, and that's the beauty of marriage and bringing kids into this world. So we have a long ways to go. Our first is due. We have a baby girl due in January. So that's another adventure that we're going to start on because now I get to be a father and I get to try to instill all those things that my family has instilled in me.
Yeah, it's funny when I was laughing inside when you said my wife, she's Italian and comes from a big Italian family because my husband is the same. And I love Italians. They are so like loving. So all of the things that you say, I'm like, oh, I can completely relate to that.
I
So
knew I knew I was in heaven the first time I go to stay at my in-laws house with my wife. They have like all these strombolis waiting, meatballs, the pastas. There's desserts I've never known what the names even are. And I'm trying sfigadelle for the fur. I don't even know that's how you say it. But like my father-in-law, and he's not a big guy. He won't eat the desserts. He just wants to see me and my wife
mhm,
enjoy the desserts. And like I'm like,
yes.
Tom, are you gonna have one? And he's like, no, I can't. He's like, he likes to drink his carbs at happy hour, so he's not gonna eat them. So I knew this was a perfect match for me because every time we go, they feed, we drink, we laugh. It's really, really a great time.
I want to go back to the day that you found out that you yourself were going to be a father. What was that like?
So I'm a planner. I don't like things to be sprung on me. My wife loves surprises. Like if she could be a surprise every day of her life, she would do it. It's always like, oh, let's sneak away and fly in and surprise my parents and just show up. And I'm like, I like to know like what time I'm waking up every morning, when I'm having my breakfast, what time I'm taking my multivitamin. And so it's been, she always wanted to surprise me. That was the biggest thing. She wanted it to be a surprise. We knew we were going to go on our honeymoon. And hopefully after that, at some point, we would start trying for kids. So unfortunately, the first time around, she's like, oh, we're not pregnant. So I want to take all the pressure off her because everyone's like, hey, stop trying to put the pressure. It'll happen when it's meant to be. So I remember coming home from work one day. I'm, training in the mornings. I work for a real estate company afternoons as an intern, trying to figure out what I'm going to do post football. That's a whole nother conversation. So I leave the office. I come home. I'm on the phone with a buddy telling him about my day, and there's music playing when I come into the house. And it's the song by Jordan Davis. Next thing you know, it's kind of talking about him becoming a father. And I'm like, maybe she's like cooking dinner and she has the music on. Like, music's normally not playing when I walk into the house. So I come around the corner in our kitchen and like I see her crying, and there's baby onesies and a bunch of pregnancy tests on our counter. And at first, I just like, I'm on the phone. Hey, I got to go. Hang up on my buddy, drop my bag. And I'm like, are you pregnant? Like, I'm in shock. And I walk up and I see that she has taken 15 different pregnancy tests. So I'm just so confused trying to analyze, like, are we pregnant? Like, I'm looking at this test and I'm looking at this other one, and one's a plus side and one has two lines and one has a baby emoji on it. And I'm like, how are we sure we're pregnant? And, she's like, I've taken 15 tests. I've been waiting a few weeks to tell you because the first time I took it, the line was so faint. So it was such an unbelievable moment for us because first time parents, you don't know if you can even have kids. So it's a fear, and you start being irrational, and it's just a huge moment of embrace. We both start, again, I'm not a big crier. We start, tearing up a bit. You start thinking about the responsibility that's now on your plate. And I was more excited to tell her parents. That was kind of the most excited I was. Like, I come from a family. My oldest brother has three kids. My sister has two. The first one is just so magical. I remember my nephew Jack when we found out my brother and sister-in-law were pregnant for the first time. The whole family was just in awe. And then my sister having her first son. So I knew my family kind of, as excited as they would be. It wasn't the first, so like we kind of knew what to expect. But with my wife's family, it's the first grandchild of the entire family. So I knew that this was going to be such a huge moment for her. The day after we got married, my father-in-law was like, all right, time for grandkids. We need six grandkids. Like, he wants this big family. So I underestimated how excited maybe my mom was. She's a crier. So she starts crying right away. It was such a great moment for her. I'm so excited for her to become a grandmother to my children because she does such an amazing job with my other siblings' kids. And then we went down to Florida, and they had to have known because on a whim, we're flying down to Florida to tell them. And my father-in-law always asked my wife, are you craving pickles today? Do you want some pickles? Like, I guess that's a sign you're pregnant. So we went out and we bought like 5 jars of pickles and put it on the counter. And he walked in and went berserk. So my wife actually filmed it. So it's on her Instagram. So everyone can go look at it on her Instagram the moment we told all of our family members. So it was special.
That's so cute. I love it. So I wanted to know, so when your daughter's coming, she's January, so only a few months really. It'll be here before you know it. And then I know, right? It goes by so fast. And what are some of the values that you want to instill in your daughter?
Ooh, I want to be the example of like the men that will come later in her life. It's a scary thing having a daughter. You don't think about it until you have your own daughter on the way. Um, it's a scary world out there to bring. I like tell my wife I kid because when we first met in New York, she would go for runs and she would run around Central Park. And I remember telling her, I was like, I don't feel comfortable you running late at night around Central Park. It's just like I just didn't sit well with me. So now I'm like saying when our daughter is at college, I'm gonna have someone following her around at all times just to make sure she's safe. Like I just instantly go to like that protector mentality, that offensive line mentality of like that's my biggest fear. And I know one day she's gonna leave the nest and go do her own thing. So I guess the one way to protect her is to be an example of what she wants to have in her life and how she should be treated. So I've seen some really great teammates of mine and how they've raised their daughters. I've seen how my sister was raised and the standard that was set. So being the standard that she wants to see in other men is huge. Hopefully she ends up a lot more like my wife than me when it comes to some of the other things where I get so obsessed and crazy about things. But I'm just excited to teach her about life and about like what I love and what my wife loves and the values that we like. I want to have a huge family. I want to be the house that all of her and her friends want to come to, and we have pool parties. And later in life, she invites us to go to college, and we get to go out with her in college, and she's not scared to have us around. I do want to embarrass her a little bit. I want to kind of be the dad with the megaphone when I'm dropping her off at school, telling her I love her. Just things like that. I'm looking forward to. I'm not the best with little babies because I'm such a big guy. Like holding the little baby, I feel like I could like harm her. So I never like to hold my nieces and nephews. But once they get to the age of like, let's go outside and go swimming in the pool, or that's where I thrive. So I'm gonna have a learning curve with a newborn baby and like making sure I feel comfortable holding her. So that's and changing diapers. That's the one thing I haven't done a lot of. So I'll be getting a lot of practice come January 18th.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. It's like a switch. And then 2 weeks in, you'll be like, this is nothing.
I'm sure. I'm sure we'll get competitive with it. I'll tell my wife I can change the diaper faster than she can. So that's how I'll get through those times.
I want to know, for any young men that are listening to this, what would your advice be to them if they are going through a similar situation that you did when you were 13 years old and the loss of your father?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough as a young man to know how to channel that energy. So maybe that's another reason maybe why football kind of stuck with me. Maybe I had that aggression in me for so long, like not having my dad around and kind of holding the resentment against him, and then never being able to have a real conversation to like let him know how I felt about him not being around. Maybe that's what kind of propelled me in football a little bit. I always wanted to like prove that I could, go out there. So what I would say to young men is to have conversations. Don't be afraid to talk about your emotions. Like young men are taught, be tough, don't show emotions. And I remember I broke down at my sister's wedding. This was like 5 or 6 years ago. I remember crying like uncontrollably. I had a couple drinks and some tequila that night. And like it was one of those things where her father was supposed to be there to walk her down the aisle, and he wasn't there. And that was something that kind of just like maybe it was like 10, 15 years of like holding it in, kind of let it all out. But yeah, definitely having those conversations and knowing that you can go to your parents and that's what they're there for. And that's something that I probably could have done a better job of. But at the same time, it's something that I don't regret how I handled anything. Everyone has to handle it their own way. But if I could and you could build up that courage to go talk to somebody, it would go talk to your parents or your sibling or even your friends, the ones that you never want to be embarrassed in front of your friends at that age, but you'd be surprised at how good people are. I look at my nephew now, who's the same age I was, and he's such a good kid. Like I could imagine, like if a friend went to him and had that conversation, that he would be there for him. So trust in society, trust in there's good people out there, and have those conversations.
What has made you so passionate about giving back to the community?
I love people. I love to see people smile. I love to just make people laugh. If I'm just walking by somebody in public that I don't know, I love to crack a joke and just see them smile. Life's too short. Life is too short. I've lost people since my dad, grandparents and aunts and uncles. And you realize when you lose people that you never know. Every day, when my dad woke up that day, he had plans that night for dinner, for the next day, for the next week, and he never got to fulfill those. And I think about how quickly my time could come to an end. Like there's guys on the football field that have injuries and can't live the same life they thought they would live. And there's guys that play football that take their own lives and have substance abuse issues and aren't there for their kids. So that's the one thing that I think about a lot, is being there for my child and providing that life that she could never imagine. I don't know how that's going to go, but I want her to live the best life. So who knows how that's going to unfold, but that's a father's dream, I guess.
So before I let you go, this has been so wonderful talking to you. I've learned so much about your life, and it's so interesting. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think someone should know?
I think about goal setting a lot. And I think that's something that I've talked about. My mom was a school teacher, fifth and sixth grade for 35 years. And I would always go back and talk to her class. I think you're never too old to write down your goals, short-term goals, goals for the year, goals for the next month, goals for the week. And that continues to kind of be the standard that you set for yourself. And that's something that I wish I would have done early on in life. And then the other thing I would probably give as an opinion is remember to treat people with respect. I remember the kids when I was in fifth or sixth grade that weren't the kids treating people the right way. And maybe I wasn't at times. And remember that that person has a family, that person has a life. So just going and being nice to someone, holding the door, smiling, making sure you treat people with respect goes a long way. Because at this point in my life, I'm 33 years old. Just my birthday was yesterday, actually. And I still remember those kids in high school that weren't treating people right. And those are the people I don't want in my life anymore. So just know no matter how old you get, they're always going to remember how you were as a young person. So remember your reputation. Now with social media and all these things out there in the world, your reputation will follow you a lot longer than it once did. So just remember the way you treat people has a lasting impression. So those are the two things. Write your goals down, really shoot for the moon, and just remember to be a nice person. Like that's such a key to our society, all the sadness and trouble that we're coming across. Just be a good person, and that goes a long way.
Oh, thank you, Justin, so much. This has been incredible. And you're 33 and you have really done a lot throughout your life and accomplished so many things. And you are going to be, it sounds like an absolutely wonderful father.
I hope so.
And
You'll have to have my daughter on in a few years from now, 10 years down the road, and we'll see how I'm doing.
Get a follow-up from her.
Exactly.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you, Justin, so much. And I want to thank everyone for listening and tuning in to another episode of the Truman Charities Podcast. Until next time. If you enjoyed this episode in our Vanishing Fathers series, please make sure to rate and review this podcast. The reviews really do count. If you'd like to hear more about the statistics and further understand the impact on fathers in society, please purchase our book, Vanishing Fathers, A Ripple Effect on Tomorrow's Generation. All proceeds from the book will directly go to charities that are helping at-risk youths. And if you'd like to follow us online, go to our website, trumancharities.com, Facebook @Truman Charities, Instagram, Jamie_Truman Charities, and you can follow me on LinkedIn @Jamie Truman. Thank you so much for listening to our Vanishing Fathers series, and please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any further episodes.